Welcome to The Difference. I'm Steve Castile, and today we're going to spend time with a very good friend of mine who has a story that you just couldn't make up. Stay tuned.
You are listening to The Difference, a presentation from The Hour, a 54-year ministry. Steve, first we started on radio, then went to television, then we went streaming online. So at Our Stream, you can watch our programming from all those years. So it's at thehour.org. And now, here we are.
Welcome back. Anthony, today we're going to introduce our audience to a person that has become a very important person in my life. Whenever I was moving from Madison, really serving in Clinton and moving from Madison to Hattiesburg, a friend of mine, John Frazier, called and said, I know somebody very well down in the Heritage Church, and I'm going to connect you. And said his name is Jim Wild, and we're going to go have lunch with him. And we did. Went down, had lunch with Jim in the middle of a tornado. Ended up in the vault of the bank
That's
while
just
we were
every
waiting.
other Tuesday in
Exactly.
Hattiesburg.
It was, just the typical acquaintance. And so today, as I was here at Heritage, I got to know he and his wife Tony, and became familiar with their journey. And we talk about difference. Not only is he one, but his wife was an incredible difference. So today we want you to welcome my good friend Jim Wild. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Anthony.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad
Thank you
you're
very
here.
much. Yeah, I appreciate it. It was an interesting day. The first day that I met Steve, and as he said, we were under a tornado watch, warning, whatever. And but yeah, I shared with Steve a little bit about my life and the journey that I had with Tony, and I'll certainly kind of share that with the audience today. I guess I will go back to the late 1990s and tell you a little bit about my own story as it leads into my story with Tony. But I'd gone through a very difficult divorce that was not of my own choosing, and had two young children at the time who were 5 and 3, and finally, one day, my preacher at the time, while we were on a mission trip in Mexico, who happened to be my roommate on the trip, was up one night writing this long letter. Little did I know he was writing the letter to me that he felt like it was time for me to let go and let God work in my life, because it was very apparent to him, and he saw more than I could see in the midst of my grief, that the marriage wasn't going to work. And so as I began to transition into a single dad and went through the unfortunate legal proceedings of a divorce and custody, I ended up with my children in 1997. And so over those next couple of years, it was a very, very deep, challenging time for me personally. And it was during that time I met Eddie Spencer, actually, which
Wow.
you
And
probably
we
know
just
Eddie
did a podcast
very
with
well.
Eddie right before he passed.
Yeah, and Eddie was he was a rock for me, and a great source of strength and wisdom and godly advice. And so I just made up my mind that I was going to grow in my relationship with God, grow in my faith, be the best dad I could be for my children, and just see what God had in store. And so as I embarked on that journey, it was I just really grew in some incredible ways in my prayer life, in my daily walk, and finally, I guess about 1999, I sort of began to come out of the funk that I'd been in, and was really feeling great in my own walk in my life. Felt like I had begun to heal spiritually and physically from that. And I shared a request with my cousin's wife as I was visiting them in Hattiesburg one evening. And, I'd been uh, out of my marriage now for a couple of years, and I really longed to have my soulmate and have someone to share life with and also to help me raise my children. And so I shared with my cousin's wife that I really didn't know how to date in my early 40s and really didn't know what that was going to look like, but I sure wished I could meet a Christian woman who was looking to build a life and be a mom, stepmom, and just help me and join me in this life journey. Well, I'll shift now to a little bit of where Tony was at that point in her life.
Well, before you do that, I do want to say something about already what strikes me because we talk a lot about being different. We talk a lot about the people in our lives who have helped us be different, people who have come alongside of us and nudge us in directions or
Yes,
keep us between the dishes. And your friend writing the letter, other friends coming alongside of you, and just you didn't just one day wake up at a point saying, "All right, now I want to find my soulmate and who God has for me." I mean, that was a journey for you, and God sent people along your path to help you get there, and that's what being a different is. And I just didn't want us to lose. I didn't want to forget about that because that really jumped out at me. How thankful I am for the people in my life that God puts there, and I know you feel the same way.
absolutely, Anthony. And Steve Ramp at the time was my minister, who I'm still close friends with. I mentioned Eddie Spencer. Obviously, my mother at that time was a rock for me and helping me as well as Steve's wife, Ellen Ramp, who acted as sort of another mom and spiritual advisor. And so, yeah, it is all about the people who walk alongside you and help you when sometimes it's difficult to have clarity of vision and clarity of
Right,
thought.
right.
So,
And I think the thing that I know about you is that was never a one-way exercise. Eddie, you and Tony both, such a great support to him. When he and I were talking on the podcast, he just said
yes,
y'all were friends for life and that y'all had really been with him through his illness. And the same with Steve. Steve's wife faced a lot of challenges, and as he relocated and lived into his retirement, you were right there for him to encourage him and help him along a very difficult season of his life.
yes, yes. It all is mutual, and as you said, I believe that God, orchestrates all of this. I think of it as a beautiful tapestry as we go through life, and we're all just a small thread that's interwoven
Interwoven, yes.
with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of
Yeah.
really amazing other people, other bright colors, and at the end, it creates this beautiful tapestry of color and texture and richness, and so absolutely that I would say is so very true. And so, talking about Tony a little bit,
Yes.
she she in her own right had been through an incredibly challenging life that started at age 29. Um, she had been married to a guy named Tom Shoemaker who was in higher education, and they had just moved back from Oregon to Hattiesburg, and he had assumed the role of the Dean of Students over at USM, working alongside Joe Paul, who today is the president at USM. And Tom was apparently a great guy. I never knew him personally, but Tony, shortly after moving to Hattiesburg, uh, was doing a self breast exam and discovered a lump in one of her breasts that ultimately was diagnosed as malignant. And so, um, being at age 29, she had this beautiful long black hair, and as you know, most women their hair obviously is very important to a woman, and she decided to do a lumpectomy. In her career, her profession was that of an operating room nurse, and so she knew a lot about the medical side of it, and what went on through the surgeries and recovery. So she opted for a lumpectomy, along with chemo and radiation, and she made that decision that if it ever came back, that she would then do more radical surgery. That was the only option from a medical perspective. But she did well. She recovered. She did great. They recommended that she was at a point they were ready to start thinking about having a family, and they recommended that she wait 5 years to be sure that she was fully cancer free, and that was kind of the point at which they could start thinking about children. And so
that's a long time to
yeah,
wait.
that is,
Yeah.
especially when you're right there at that prime of your life when you're really ready to start having a family. So
Right.
when that day came, she and Tom, he loved to. He had a vision for USM and the campus, and he really ultimately wanted to create this central inner campus without any cars, and to have a walking central campus. And so frequently they would travel to other universities and get ideas and see what they had done, and sort of just to help him as he thought through what his vision of USM was. So the 5-year anniversary came. They were going to celebrate. It was Labor Day weekend, and they headed off up to the Carolinas to go visit some universities. And along the way, as they were on the interstate through near Knoxville, Tennessee, they had a flat tire in the car. And it was the back rear driver's side tire, and so they pulled off the shoulder of the interstate, and Tom was changing the tire of the car. Tony was standing just at the back rear panel by the trunk, and a lady was distracted by her young children in the back seat of the car, and sadly veered off and struck Tom and killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony always told me, she says, I have no idea how I wasn't struck, because I was 3 feet from Tom. She said I was just right there, and I still just don't understand how God allowed me to not be struck as well.
And the trauma of
Yep.
being right there,
Yes.
watching it happen.
Yes, I cannot even imagine, but it's very obvious. It was, you can only imagine how tragic that would be, and how difficult it would be to see your loved one 1 minute just there and the next minute gone.
And especially in that expectant window of time where
sure.
they had waited, and it was just, wow.
Yeah. So they, when they got Tom to the hospital.
What year would this have been?
This would have been 1997 that occurred. Okay. And so it's really kind of a weird thing, because I actually was at the USM football game that night, and they announced and had a moment of silence for Tom. And little did I know what that would mean to me later on in my own life. And so at that point, they asked Tony, if she had ever thought about organ donation. And she said she really hadn't. And but she said, I knew who Tom was, and I knew what a giving, generous person he was. And she said, I don't know why at that point in time, but I just immediately said, sure, yeah, I think that's great. And so I think he was able to help 7 different people with corneal eye, everything from heart, kidneys, just all of the various organs and tissue that comes through that incredibly selfless act of allowing your loved one to give their organs and provide a second chance at life for someone else. And again, one of the interesting stories that occurred during that time was one of Tony's two best friends growing up in New Orleans was living in Houston, Texas at the time. And she called Tony, and Tony was telling her what she had done. And she said, I have my best friend in Houston's mom is dying because she can't get a kidney.
Oh, wow.
And she's close to not being able to live much longer. Do you think there's any way you could direct a kidney to her if, she didn't know a lot about the process? And Tony said, well, there's, a lot that has to happen, and it's a long shot. But sure, if there's the potential and the kidney is a match, absolutely. And so that lady got one of Tom's kidneys,
Oh,
Wow.
and it
how
saved
cool.
saved her life.
And I think,
Yep.
we're going to talk about this later, but it's so easy to become a donor.
It is very
I have it on
simple.
my license.
Yes.
My parents went from doing that to donating their whole bodies to science.
Sure.
And so I think, you just never know, as you said, the weaving that will happen of the
Absolutely.
way God is ahead of us, and in that prevenient grace, taking the tragedy and creating life out of it, a resurrection kind of moment.
Absolutely. And it is, I could tell you story after story, and I'll get to Tony's
Mhm.
transplant story later, but the relationship when someone who acts as a donor and later desires to meet the person that received their loved one's organ,
Mm.
it's a powerful, powerful testimony to the goodness of God and the glory that the incredible gratitude and grace that happens. I've seen it, and it's phenomenal. So
Wow.
Well, the scripture of how we're all different members, and one's the hand, one's the
yes,
feet, and Mark Lowry made fun of Bill Gaither once and said, "You're the nose," So we all have our parts, we all have the things, and I'm sitting here thinking of interacting with someone who has your loved one's eye, or that type of thing. Uh, what a, First of all, the creativity that it took for doctors to get to that point to be able to do that.
sure,
We serve a creative God who instills that desire in us to create ourselves.
sure,
That is a powerful power. Everything you're saying is like every sentence he says can be a different episode.
Exactly.
It's just
Almost,
incredible.
Yeah.
just,
yeah.
you may have to become a co-host and
That's
kind of
fine.
insert yourself
Yeah.
in here.
So let me continue then and move forward with the rest of Tony's story, because it's somewhat, you just can't believe it unless you
you
truly
can't.
hear it. So after Tom passed away and Tony donated all of these organs, she actually maintained a relationship with the lady that got Tom's heart, and they would talk annually, and it became a special bond. I've actually witnessed someone put a stethoscope on the chest of a person who has their loved one's heart. And you can't imagine
Wow.
what
Mm.
you experience and how to hear a part of their loved one that's still living on through someone else. And the analogy of how God works in our own heart, and
Wow.
He is our heartbeat.
Right.
And so, anyway, Tony went for another year. Friends recommended that she not make any life-changing decisions for a full year. And so she stood pat and worked in Hattiesburg, continued to work in the OR, and a year went by. And almost a year to the date from Tom's death, she discovered a lump in her other breast. So as she had already determined the first time, she had double mastectomy, reconstructive surgery, which is a pretty big deal, and obviously no radiation. There's nothing to radiate, but went through the chemo, And the two drugs that were used both times were the adriamycin Cytoxan regimen, which, if you know anything, unfortunately, I know way more about cancer and cancer drugs than I ever wanted to know, but both of those drugs have been determined to be very toxic to the heart. And so a few weeks after she went through the surgery and she was doing well and beginning to get back up and going and work again, and she became very ill suddenly and thought she had the flu, and actually went to an outpatient just clinic to get checked, and they said, yeah, it probably is the flu, and just go home, rest, and not much we can do, just drink plenty of fluids, everything you do when you have the flu. So she went home and got no better in a couple of days, and she said, I really thought I was dying. And I went to the ER, and in fact, she was dying. She was in severe congestive heart failure.
Wow.
And they immediately rushed her down to Tulane University and to their cardiac unit, where they're doing a lot of experimental drugs and research and just a higher level of care for someone in her condition. And real honestly, after they assessed her there, they told her mom and dad that we really can't make you any promises. We don't know that Toni will survive this. She's had severe damage to her heart, and we all, I guess the medical terminology is an ejection fraction. Everybody's heart usually is in the mid-60s of an ejection fraction. Well, Toni's was in the low 30s, and that was as good as they could get it. And it was about 10 when they got her there. So thankfully, the experimental drugs did in fact work. But she was told she would probably be totally and permanently disabled. She would probably never work again. Certainly, she would have a very limited ability to be active in life. And she just looked at him and said, "Watch me." And she refused to accept.
That's great.
Was that when she developed her mantra?
You know, that really came a little bit later, but it certainly would fit then. What Steve's referring to is strong, fierce, and optimistic. And I think that defines
Every
Toni
email
well.
exchange,
Grit,
every group that was
yes,
there,
yep,
it was those three words:
yep,
strong,
yep.
fierce, and optimistic.
And
And she was all three.
she was, and she possessed an incredible grit, just to overcome hard things and in life. So at that point, within 6 months, she did recover, and she was back working full time. And this was about the time that the two of us met. And as I shared with you, as I shared about my own self and my own, well, I don't know that I've even shared that part, but as I said, I was coming to Hattiesburg, bringing my children to stay with my cousin, and I had shared that, I was at a point in my life I would love to meet a Christian woman and somebody maybe that would be a stepmom. And well, Toni also was going through a period in her life of searching. And I think there was a key moment that really sort of turned Toni's face quickly back to God. And it occurred at the old Cloverleaf Mall of all places, which wasn't even a full-scale mall, but it had a food court. And she decided one day to have lunch there. And there was a medical equipment salesman that she knew very well, who had come around to the different places she worked, by the name of Chuck Young. And as they were sitting eating, he invited her to have lunch. Nobody else in the food court, but here Chuck and Toni are. And Chuck looked at Toni and said, "Toni, do you have any idea why you are still here?"
Wow.
And Toni just said, it just hit her. And she said, "I had never really thought about, why am I still here? And what is it that God really wants to do with me or through me?" And when she left the lunch that day, that question just sort of resonated for the rest of the afternoon. She said she just went home and broke down and started crying. And she said, I just never had thought about it. And, what is my purpose? And Chuck introduced her to a mentor that he had known for a long time by the name of Kim Smith. And Kim had been through her own challenges in life, and he suggested to Tony, hey, I'd like to introduce you to Kim. You get together, and I think she'd be a great person to walk alongside you. And Anthony, that goes back to that same
Chuck and
thought.
Kim coming alongside.
Chuck, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Kim and Tony got together, and they began to go to church together. And Tony grew up Catholic, and she'd never been much of a, as Catholics, you go to Mass, and she was more of the traditional Catholic, where you go and the priest performs Mass, you take communion, you say your Our Fathers and your Hail Marys, and that's kind of the extent of church.
Yeah.
And so for the first time, Kim began to open her eyes to small groups and women who get together to pray together and carry one another's burdens. And so Tony began to explore and really expand her desire to want to know God and want to know Christ better. And at some point in that mentorship over the next few months, Tony just shared a thought that, while she didn't know what God had in store for her, she sure wished that she could meet a Christian guy who had either custody of her kids or was a widower. And so Kim said, well, Tony, I believe in praying in specifics. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to share this with my prayer group, with my women. And we're going to pray specifically for that for you. And she said, is that okay? She said, sure. So the next time these women met in their prayer group, Kim shared this prayer request. Well, my cousin's wife happened to be in that same prayer group. And when she finished, my cousin's wife, whose name is Kevin said, well, Kim, you just described my cousin's, my husband's cousin. And so at that point, they asked each of us if we would like to meet. And so we arranged to meet at church one Sunday. And we did that. We actually went to First Presbyterian on Hardy Street. And I brought William and Stephen at the time. And so we had a wonderful time together in church, and went out to eat afterwards at McAllister's. And then finally, she invited me to come to her dog's birthday party that afternoon, which I thought was a little bit strange. Only did I know then.
You would always be second to that dog.
Only did I. I found out later on. I tell people, as much as I enjoyed being Tony's husband, in my next life, I want to come back as her dog, because that was the real good gig. So. Anyway, so we met and we started dating, and about a year later we got married on July the 1st of 2000. And so my prayer was answered, and Tony's prayer was answered, and I truly found my soulmate. And
And I think that's a perfect place for us to because I want us to do another episode. And you talk about this cycle. I'm just sitting here and thinking about the heartstrings and the whole idea of that fabric. And
yeah, because she had a heart flutter of a different kind.
Exactly.
Heart issues of a different kind when she met you. And
yes,
but the brokenness of both of your hearts and the healing that happened in so many different ways at so many different levels. Yeah. And the two of you coming together, and I can say this, spoiler alert for next episode, they had an incredible marriage, and just the love they had was so just obvious and pure. And so it was one of those, forget The Bachelor. women's prayer groups are the way to go if you're looking for a wife.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
Especially in Hattiesburg.
Especially.
Yes.
And so as you met and got married, there was this chapter where you both ended up at a place where you'd want to be, but the journey you went through to get there was not how you would have chosen to get there.
No. And it was, we both had been through a lot. And we thought that we were then going to experience the happily ever after.
Right.
But as we will talk about in the next episode, we were thrown some additional curveballs. Yet, as Tony would say, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I wouldn't change a thing because of the way things worked out for us.
Because
And
it
was
wouldn't
because
have
of our
been
faith. Yes.
the same
It wouldn't.
without any of the
No.
elements,
No.
without any of the journey.
Right.
And so, Jim, thank you for being so transparent with that. And I hope those of you who are listening and maybe later watching on YouTube will continue to be in prayer. But in each of our circles, we've all had just episodes where we felt like, can anything else go wrong? And the answer is usually yes. But in the midst of that, God is always sending messengers, advocates, mentors to help us navigate that valley of the shadow of death. And when we hear a story like yours, I hope those who are listening are encouraged. And as we'll share in the next episode, it doesn't end with just making it through the journeys. There's something that happens to us that makes us want to do something about it, to share our experience, to take what God has given us and come alongside of other people that are challenged. So I hope you'll stay tuned for next time. And Anthony, I can't
It's
wait.
good stuff.
I can't wait for them to hear the next part of this.
Yeah.
And it's one of those.
I'm just wondering how you've got all these wonderful, sweet, kind friends. How does that happen?
It's Provinia Grace. You know, that's just like he still keeps trying to weed people into my life and saying, maybe one time this will take.
Maybe so. Well, I can't wait to hear more.
Yes.
It's
Well,
going to be great.
Thank you.
Y'all will love it. So watch for the next episode and share this. And remember, as always, hey, live loved.
You've been listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour. The Difference is made in conjunction with and partnership with the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College. To find out more about the Institute and ways that we are partnering and mentoring young lives through storytelling, filmmaking, and more, visit us at southernstorytelling.mc.edu. And for more resources from The Hour and from The Difference, check us out at our Hour Stream platform with the streaming content at thehour.org. I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining.